Hello folks, here again. And I'm going to talk about, I want to call this video "So You Bought a Guitar, Now What?" Because a friend of mine thought a video introductory to guitar would be something good. And so here we go. So you bought a guitar. It could be an acoustic guitar. Could be an electric guitar. I'm holding an electric guitar here. They're all pretty similar. The difference is an acoustic guitar will be pretty wider here, and it'll have what they call a sound hole, or a hole cut into the body. And basically that hole in there is basically when you play the strings, it's acting like the speaker, so it's resonating out, like basically making its own sound, as opposed to an electric guitar like I have here, which requires amplification, because it is not loud enough in itself to be heard without other means of miking it up. So let's say you bought an electric guitar. So there's many different types of electric guitars. You have like Les Paul, you have Fender Stratocaster, Fender Telecaster, and numerous others, but most of them are trying to mimic the Les Paul or the Stratocaster, or a combination of both of them together. I have a 7-string here by Carvin. It's pretty good, which kind of mimics a Stratocaster somewhat. Stratocaster, Fender Strat that came out, would have 3 pickups like this. This has 3 pickups, although 2 of them are bigger than the others, but we'll talk about that. And then a Les Paul would typically have only this pickup here and this, without the center pickup, typically. Now, also a Stratocaster is going to kind of have a flat body on the guitar. Sometimes it'll have a pick guard, which is a piece of plastic that covers the bottom portion of this, so when you're using the pick and you're striking, you're not actually hitting the body, you're hitting the pick guard if you actually did pick that much. But I went away. And then the Les Paul is a little more of has a little more curve to it. It's kind of like a carved top, not really flat, so to speak. Now we'll talk about the parts of the guitar. Well, so you bought a guitar, you kind of want to know, well, what are the parts? Well, typically you have a bridge, which is this piece here where the strings are attached to the body. Now this whole thing down here is called the body. This is the body of the guitar. And then this is the bridge. This right here, of course, is the neck. Go figure, right? You got a body, you need a neck, right? And so the next part is called not just a head, but they call it the head stock, because the head just probably didn't sound good. So you got the body, the neck, and the head stock. Now, going back, so you have the bridge, which your strings run through or attached in some way right now. We'll get into something else later, but they attach to the bridge, and then they attach to these things on the other side called tuners. These things here are tuners. They come in many styles: black, silver, gold, whatever. These particular ones, let's see, put the camera up here. These particular ones are locking tuners. It's hard to see, but yeah, they get kind of little gnarled pieces on there for them to bite down on the string to lock them in tune. Now, also on the neck, if we're talking about the neck, in particular, you have different fretwoods. Some necks are rosewood, which is a dark wood. There's maple, which is like, this is a type of maple. It's called bird's eye maple because it has dots in there. I don't know if you can see the dots, but it has some dots in there. But that's maple. And you'll have rosewood, which is a darker kind of brownish wood. You have ebony, which is almost black, of course the name ebony, and there's some other styles, but most of the typical ones that anybody buys first, it's either going to be a maple neck or it'll be a rosewood neck. And yeah, and then the back of the neck is usually rock maple, unless you get some other guitars. Sometimes the woods are mahogany. But we'll get into woods a little, probably in another video. I'm just trying to give you the overall basics. Basically, these metal, along the neck, you have like these metal slots, raised things along the neck. These raised pieces or pieces of metal are called the frets. And you have the first fret, second fret, third fret, all the way down. Like this one has 24 frets on this fretboard. Some guitars, some older guitars have 22, some have 21, a lot of them nowadays have 24. The frets themselves can be made out of different material. These ones in particular are made out of stainless steel because they hardly wear down, if ever. And also you'll notice, and then this little piece right here is called the nut. This black piece you see at the end, that's called the nut. They can be made like this. This is like typically like acoustic guitars would be made with this. Some Stratocasters have this style of nut here. The typical ones now, the rock and roll guitars, will actually have locking nuts here. There's like little Allen screws on here, and that's called the locking nut. That basically keeps it in tune when you're using the Whammy Bar. And now I'll talk about the Whammy Bar now. This thing is called a Whammy Bar. Some people call it a tremolo, but that's not technically true because the tremolo came from the sound of an amplifier and not the unit, but it kind of makes that sound, so maybe that's why they called it. But most people call it a Whammy Bar. This one in particular is styled after a Floyd Rose. It's basically you got a set of locking Allen screws on the back side here. There's Allen screws that bite down on the string going in here that are seated in here that lock in here. And then typically they'd put a locking nut here. But I found that I like the locking tuners better because these tuners are special. They have a pin that actually goes up through and bites on the string on the individual tuners. And I found that the guitar is more resonant without this locking nut for some reason. I guess, I don't know, maybe I'm picky, but it seems to resonate a lot better if I don't have that lock nut on there. So I like these locking tuners better. That's not to say that, you know, if you're getting really wangy on these tuners could pull loose, but you know, if you stretch everything, all your strings out, they'll stay in tune. But not everybody has this. This is also called a floating bridge because it's routed. If you can see in the back, it's kind of routed out in this part here. That's basically called a recess for the trem, but it's floating because I can lift this up. This bar actually goes down somewhat, it'll push down and then it'll lift up this way. Some some other types of tremolo units, you can't pull back on it. It's seated right against the body, so when you're pulling back, you're just deadheading right against the body. So there's no. Eddie Van Halen was famous for, well, most of his guitars deadheaded. They couldn't pull them back. You had to basically drive them forward to basically make the strings floppy in this instance, but now you can raise the pitch up. This is called a double cutaway because there's one cutaway here and one cutaway there. This is in particular a neck through guitar. This means that the neck and the body is all one piece. Basically, in this instance, you can see where the neck is totally through the body, and then they glue, they put wings, they call them wings. They'll glue these pieces to the neck, and then they shape everything up. But the whole point of a neck through is that each end of the string is tied to the same piece of wood to help make it resonate a lot better. Because if you think about frequencies in wood, I know it's kind of hard when you're just beginning, but if you can hear it, if you're tapping the wood and you can hear it resonate, that's a pretty good guitar. Also, yeah, tuners. Talked about tuners. Like I said, these are pickups. This is called the bridge pickup. Obviously, it's closer to the neck bridge here, and then this is the neck pickup because it's closer to the neck, of course. Now this one is called the middle pickup because it's obviously in the middle of the two. So typically, this is your standard configuration on most super Stratocasters. The typical Stratocaster would just have, like, one bar here, one bar there, and one bar here, and those are just called single coil pickups in this case. These two together are called humbuckers. That's just the name of it. I won't discuss why. This one is a single coil pickup because basically each one of these is a coil, so this thing is two coils. But they don't call it like a dual or nothing, they just call it a humbucker. And then that's a single coil, and then you get a humbucker up here. Now the Strat had 3 single coils all in a line, with one on the bridge being angled to help with the bass tones not being so shimmery. Also, I think on the treble side, because you get tighter back here, the treble goes up. But it's typical. Usually you have like a tone control here. Basically it changes your bass and highs. It'll bleed off the high frequencies a little more with the tone down than up, and then basically a volume, so you can get the sound out of your amp or not. This thing here comes with a 5-way selector switch. The 5-way selector switch, some are 3, depending on how many pickups you have in the configuration. You might have a 3-way toggle or something of that nature. And some guitars, like Les Pauls, have 2 volumes and 2 tone controls, which means you have, in the Les Paul configuration, you have the neck and bridge, and then you have 2 volumes, 1 volume for the bridge, 1 volume for the neck, and then the same with the tone. You'd have 1 tone for the bridge and 1 for the neck. but in this instance I have the same tone for either one, so you get a jack with the tone when you swap between the bridge and the neck. So in this instance, all the way back on my switch just runs this pickup only. These are dead. The next selector switch setting would adjust this pickup here in the closest to the bridge, and then this center coil here. The next position, center position, would just be the middle only. And this is typical with a lot of the setups, or a variation, but it's pretty similar. And one click almost would be this middle pickup, and then this neck pickup here. And then all the way forward would just be the neck. And a good way to tell if you jack around with the wiring is get yourself an Allen wrench and poke those metal pole pieces with your guitar plugged in, because you'll be able to hear it when that thing is activated or not. What else? You get a strap. You got strap holders here. Some people like using locking ones. I like using a fat strap because it's a lot easier on the back. The next thing, tuners. Right here I got a basically it's a Korg clip-on tuner. I got it a few months ago, but it basically just clips on the end of the guitar, and when you play, it resonates enough so that the string will sound out. And basically on this case, the green is basically means you're dead on with your notes, open strings. Let's just put it that way. When you tune most of the guitars, it's all open strings, and depending on the tuners you get, they can be chromatic. This one's chromatic because I don't have to jack with the buttons. Sometimes the tuners will have like 6th string or 5th string E or 1st string E. Just also note that when I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on a 6th string, your 6th string is actually the bass note. This is the top string here. But you need to start thinking backwards, because when people say the top string, we typically think of high, the high note, high string, or I do anyway. But the high string is the top string, and then the low string is actually the low string sounding string. So in this case, the standard tuning of a 6th string guitar would be from the bass side to the treble side. From string 6 down to 1, it would be E, A, D, G, B, and E, and that's standard tuning. And let's see what else. Oh yeah, one thing that you don't want to mess with, underneath this little cover here is a truss rod. There's actually a metal bar within this neck, because without any structural support with the string tension that you're tuning these strings to, this neck would warp all over the place. So they put a metal bar in there to stiffen up the neck. And so basically the neck can curve up or curve back depending on what type of truss rod you have. Now another thing I want to say is the fret height. I got pretty tall frets. I can't really see them here. Let's see. These frets are pretty tall. You get a pretty tall frets. These are jumbo frets, and basically when you fret the string, let's see here, when you fret this down, you're really not touching the fretboard. But I like the high strings because it makes it easier when you're bending. When you're bending the strings, it makes it a lot easier to be able to basically pull up under them. It helps you in bending, as opposed if you had a really vintage style, like old Stratocasters from the 50s, had like almost no frets at all. It was like your bare wood almost. And when you play, like bend a note, sometimes your finger would slip off it. But with the high frets, you can guarantee that you won't miss the string when you're bending. Also, there's a thing called the action of the guitar, and then the action is basically the height difference between the string itself and then the fret, and basically the gap between the string and the fret. The lower the action, the easier it is going to be the fret. But you got to remember also the trade-off for a low action on the high strings is if you have that same thing happen on the bass strings, you can have a little fret buzz. I don't mind a fret buzz, but some people do, so you're going to have to adjust that accordingly. But I would say as a beginner, start with a low fret action because it makes, chording easier. Something like that. It makes the chords easier. Also, get yourself, when I started out, I got a chord book. Learning chords is, pretty basic. Learn your open chords. E, A, D, G, C, right? And then F was a little difficult, but you learn it. The D, I think I did that one. And then all it's the minor chords, E minor, A minor, D minor, A minor. G minor is a little different in this case because they don't really have that, but then F minor. Right, and then you'll have I call them cowboy chords because they're cowboy chords typically because you're a cowboy on the range. You'll play something like that, right? You're just going to be strumming those open chords all day long. After you do the open chords and you learn some simple chord progressions. Chord progression is like when I say go from one chord to the next in some logical manner that I won't discuss, but it's a logical progression, let's just say, of chords. And then you get used to that, and then you can learn scales and go from there. Anyway, another important thing is a metronome. To learn, a metronome is a piece of electronic equipment that clicks at a certain tempo. Or say, in instance, if you didn't know what a tempo was, say your heartbeat is beating so many beats per minute, right? Your heart. you know, 60 beats a minute or whatever. That's what a metronome does. What a metronome does is click, 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 and it's constantly clicking to basically tell you where the downbeat is of every measure. 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can speed it up, you can slow it down, you can start slow and then speed it up as you go, but basically try and stay. In this instance, we're talking about quarter notes. Say every beat is a quarter note. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you go to eighth notes, which is equal to a quarter note, which is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then you can get into triplets and get into 16th notes, but it's a little more difficult when you're strumming 16th notes. You know, you got to slow it down, and then, but basically, if you can play eighth notes and you play those eighth notes really fast, it is playing 16th notes depending on how fast you're playing them, and just slow your tempo down. But so the metronome would be going 1, 2, 3, 4. And as you can see, I'm deading the chord, or I'm letting it ring out. It's up to you, but sometimes it's like, sometimes I find it interesting to deaden before I strum it again. Almost like they call it staccato. Something like that. Well, hopefully that'll help a little bit. It isn't going to help everything. Oh, also there's on the fretboard, there's what they call a radius. The radius is basically telling you how flat or rounded this fretboard is. Going from a classical guitar, nylon string is like almost perfectly flat. So probably the larger the radius, the flatter the neck is going to be. So like a classical guitar, like a 20, or almost perfectly flat. And then this one here is 14. Like you'll have some round ones like 7.5, which is almost like, you know, you're going from flat like classical guitar to rounded like a violin. The reason why the violin needed to be rounded was because of the bow, and you're trying to curve around with the bow, so that makes obvious sense in that regard. But with a guitar, you don't have a bow unless you're Jimmy Page playing Kashmir, but you don't typically need a bow for playing guitar, so you're gonna have a little flatter radius here, and it kind of, a lot of people said the rounded radius helps you chord better, but playing lead kind of tends to fret the notes out. But anyway, if you can get something that's comfortable, try it with your hands. You don't want it to be so flat that you can't play chords, but you don't want something so round that it's going to make playing single lines thing. Like a Stratocaster is a good guitar with a 12-inch radius most of the time, and then most Ibanez guitars will have a 16-inch radius, although they tend to say it in millimeters. The same with Jackson guitars. Les Pauls tend to have a rounder radius, and then my Carvin here is special, made for 14, so it's kind of in between flat and round. I tend to like that better. Anyway, I hope that helps. So, you bought a guitar. Awesome.